Recording. Oh, and look, Kim just joined. Hi, Kim.
I couldn't find you.
Oh, no. Where were you looking? Was something, because Jonathan mentioned that he couldn't find this link either.
I couldn't find it in email and I couldn't, but that doesn't mean it's not there. And I couldn't find it on the site. There is something posted, but it doesn't have a link to it. But then I saw there was like a live button, so I started pressing the buttons. And here I am. I knew Peter was here, so I kept going.
So Kim and I have been emailing because the Cleveland group is also trying to have regular meetings, but we don't want to overlap with this. So great to see you, Kim.
Yeah.
Hmm. Um, by any chance, did anybody get the email that I sent out today with the agenda? Did that not come through?
It came through to me.
Oh, okay.
That's what I got. It allowed me to get on.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, Anna, thank you. I think you're really organizing us well. So thank you for that.
oh, thank you. Yeah, Kim, we were just finishing up our check-ins if you want to give your check-in.
Just arriving from work and it's been a good day. There was something, from the weekend events, a couple sessions I attended. It was really interesting. I think the thought of having the migrations of animals mapped and made me think. I know Jonathan, you've mentioned of like layers and layers of mapping, like if we saw all the natural stuff and then you can put in where the human intersections on the map, it could be very cool. That was the insight from the weekend.
Yeah. And we didn't even mention that we Jonathan, Kim, and I and Victoria all were part of the Complexity Adventures Unconference, and we actually gave a little talk about this group for Earth Regenerators there, and it was very interesting to hear basically being able to share how this group can potentially collaborate with Pro Social World and Deep Transformation Network and Complexity Adventures. So yeah, it's a good conversation.
And I think we could go on with check-in. I'd like to just acknowledge Kim's leadership of the Interhub meeting this morning, where we had a guest from South America who was talking about, what can we say, Kim, consciousness in relationship to some of the work we're doing. So yeah, there are so many connections that are being made, and that's, I think, an important part of the mapping project too, if I can say that and connect perhaps to what we're going to talk about in a minute.
Yeah, definitely. And actually it looks like Doreen also joined. Hi, Doreen.
Hi, hello everybody. I am in Washington State, and so a little off the time, therefore I'm tardy. Glad to join. I haven't much to report, but I'm eager to listen and join in.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us from all the way out there. Yeah, and I think what I wanted to start out today with was so not sure, it sounds like not everybody was able to get my agenda, but basically I just kind of provided an overview of some of the trails of thought that we've been sharing over the past couple of meetings, because as we're trying to decide on what we want to do and what we want to focus on, we do have, like, I guess three areas, and it's one is well, I guess so I'll start off with our purpose. Our purposes that we've identified are that we want to make bioregionalism and regenerative projects more visible to the public and more visible to each other. We want to get a better understanding of our bioregions, and we want to develop a shared language around bioregionalism as we're kind of developing this culture. And there are, so far that I can tell, 3 different ideas that have been thrown out there. And that's one, we can map projects, which is what John Schull and Charlie Shore are already doing with their big map to save the future. We can do along the lines of what Elliot has already compiled a lot of in the Toronto bioregion, and that's gathering maps of different kinds and putting together a narrative around it that we can use for educational purposes, particularly with kids. And we could link that up with, Diane had an idea of the card sort methodology regarding how people interact with their bioregions. She does have, she shared with us an article a couple of weeks ago that I can post in the chat as soon as I find it. I personally did not read through that, but it is something that I think if we were to go that route, we would all want to look into, or if we want to make it one of the routes that we go, we could look into that. And then finally is this idea of cognitive or social mapping, which I suppose could also join with that idea of the project mapping as well. So I don't know if anybody has any comments or wants to add anything to those 3 items that I kind of mentioned.
May I do that?
Yeah.
I think as you just expressed and as Benji expressed in his presentation, this idea of cognitive mapping is perhaps the least well defined what it means. To me, it's not only individual cognition, but it's also the ideas that we share with each other, maybe the common language or the differences in language that we use. So that's a project that I'm actively involved in from my own personal research, which is what have I learned from my adventures in different forests in the world about the ideas that are important to creating a future. So it's a little bit more nebulous, perhaps, but I do think it's important. And in that slide presentation that Benji showed, he used the word noosphere. This notion that we need to think of ourselves in relationship to the planet in terms of the ideas that we think are important for creating the process of regenerating bioregions. So that's just a slight exaggeration, maybe an exaggeration, elaboration of what I meant by cognitive mapping. So thanks for that opportunity.
Yeah, and so I guess when I'm trying to organize our thoughts around this, I wanted to give us something kind of interactive to work with. So I just really quickly made a Jamboard, which I'm finding for anybody who's used Miro, it's a lot easier to use a Jamboard than it is to use Miro.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. I've been needing to discover an alternative to Miro for a very long time.
It's definitely not as complex, and I think Miro is better for doing a lot of the more complex thought processes, but this one also has little sticky notes and we can kind of add things to it. I wanted to just explore this a bit more so that we can maybe add some thoughts and have more of a collaborative feel to it rather than us kind of taking rounds and talking. So if you guys want to go on to the Jamboard that I dropped in the chat, I have the 3 sticky notes of the 3 different things that we can focus on. And I think that, Elliot, I know that you're driving, so you likely can't add anything. If you wanted to put anything into the chat or just speak about your idea a bit more, I can certainly add notes to it for you. But if you're looking at this, if you wanted to add any sticky notes, you could just click on this little box right here, and you can get a sticky note of these different colors or a not colored one. And I'm just wondering if we could just start posting some things around, like what values do we think that going this route would be? What are some of the information that we would be able to that we would need to gather, and yeah, just some thoughts around it, because I also will admit I didn't think out this project too much because I wasn't sure how many people would join, but with such a small group, I think that we can just kind of work through this together. And if anybody has any other thoughts on how we can start making decisions on this, definitely feel free to talk to. And Doreen, since you're on the phone, same thing. If you can't add anything without, if you want to just speak to what you're thinking about the three different topics that I shared, feel free, and I can add in notes yourself for you.
Thank you. Could you kindly just maybe 1 or 2 words share what each of the 3 items is?
Sure.
Again, please.
So it's mapping regenerative projects, mapping, Elliot has shared with us packets of existing maps of different topographies, watersheds, aquatic ecosystems. And the idea was to essentially take maps like that and create a packet and a narrative around it that we could use as an educational tool, or we could engage in some cognitive mapping like Peter mentioned. And I'm thinking that, let's see, what would be most helpful for us to share right now would be kind of like what would the benefits of each one be? What, yeah, like some, maybe like this, whoever has the green sticky note, what questions we have around it. I'm thinking like one of the things that I want to put under regenerative projects is, we already have a map that John Schull is putting together. So we already have some of the technology to be able to add those things. So, yeah, does that make sense?
That helps me. Thank you for saying that again.
Yeah.
And maybe to see if this stimulates people's creativity a little bit, we can kind of share for the first few as we create them, if we're willing to.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think, and I'll just go ahead and model it, I guess, if you all don't mind. So under narratives around packet of existing maps, which is the idea of weaving together all the maps that Elliot has brought together in a narrative that makes sense of all of them and helps us to understand the stories of the bioregion. I asked the question underneath, what existing stories or processes in the bioregion make use of multiple maps? So what are like the larger stories that weave things together that help us to see holistically?
I like that because I think the issue of sharing across bioregions is really important. Doreen, it's great to be with you because Doreen is working on creating a health clinic for Indigenous folks at our wonderful county hospital in Cleveland. And I do think that this issue of re-indigenization is one of those concepts I like to have on the cognitive map that reflects to some real processes by which we can engage the bioregion from the point of the view of the culture which has existed here and in Cleveland is rather disparate. It's not like we can clearly identify one or more specific Native Americans that have been here. So I think that's just a reflection. I on a tablet can't seem to actually contribute to to applying a sticky note. So I'm not quite sure what's going on, but that's just a reflection on some of the things I think are important. And one of the concepts, re-indigenization.
Okay, so I'm starting to rethink this whole interactive process because it sounds like about half of us can't access it. But I would really like to enter into more discussions about each one of these. So maybe we can go through each one and kind of talk about some of the benefits, maybe some of the barriers that we're thinking about that could come up with some of these projects. I would love to, hear what people are thinking. We can start off with like the regenerative projects, and I can post this and then it would be visible for everybody as well. So when we're thinking about mapping regenerative projects in our bioregions, specific projects like in the big map to save the world, what John Schull has is narratives around each of these projects and links to the people who are running them, and a geolocation of where it is. What are some benefits to this? What are maybe some barriers to doing something like this? I'd love to hear people's thoughts.
Well, that feels like an imperative to me. If we're mapping where we are and wanting to know more about our own bioregions, we need to know who is here and who's doing what. So, and aside from like just calling them projects, I would, it's the people and, what is being done.
Okay.
And also, in relationship to the land. I mean, this is hard for me because I don't usually think like this, it's more, and if something's more like immersion and like having a conversation and seeing what comes up, right? What is it, like the whys, like what's the most important thing?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, that's why I don't feel I'll be able to contribute very much.
I mean, I'm also open to switching this up. So I think that's what I came up with was just from rewatching some of our previous videos. And this seems to be these three things ended up coming up the most. But if we wanted to kind of take a step back too, we could definitely do that. Benji?
Well, I don't want to digress or shift away from the point you just made. If you want to have a more of a meta reflection for a moment on how this is all working, I can wait on my particular comment because it was about regenerative projects.
Oh, sure.
Should I go forward with that, or you want to open up the floor to a meta conversation?
I see you nodding your head.
I myself would like to hear what you have to say, Benji. This is Doreen.
Okay. Hey, Doreen. Well, I'll start off by saying, man, I'm like right in sync with Kimberly. I think that so I actually participated in a project of mapping a local food web from within a very academic context in the past, and it was great. We got to see what kind of things were happening, and there were all sorts of benefits. We were able to get a sense of the local resilience of the food web, and there were some things revealed that were invisible before. But to me, it also felt like we missed out on a huge opportunity because we were really doing it from afar and really categorizing everybody outside of relationship. I felt like the process of mapping itself is such a huge opportunity to get to know people and invite them into a conversation that actually increases the capacity of the community overall. I mean, it can be a very living process. And by just mapping, we're getting a different set of benefits. And I think that what I'm trying to say is, I think it's important to reflect on at the meta level on the process itself and the benefits of the process itself, and not just the outcome. I think that's all I have to say. But yeah, Kimberly, I'm like totally aligned with you. I'll
And
just say that for now. Over.
Yeah, Kim?
So, and when we're talking, I think, the common language is important. Meta level, is that like the whole, or is that looking at it holistically? Is that what meta level is?
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm not even using that word correctly. The way that I understand it when I use it is looking at the process itself, taking a step back and looking at, what are the benefits, what are the limitations of the way in which we are engaging in mapping itself? Looking beyond the map or behind the
Right.
map.
Right, and we had talked about that before, like the why, and just like what are the different types of information that can be gathered regardless of what ends up going onto a particular map. So maybe it's like getting that first, like all the maybe that's what we're doing here. Maybe that's what Anna's asking us to put into 2 buckets.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm also, like I said, I'm very open to feedback on if we need to change this up, by all means. If we want to have it be more open, that's good too. Elliot, I'd love to hear what you have to add.
Yeah, I'm no longer driving. Thanks for organizing and setting this up. Yeah, I don't think I think these are 3 good categories, but I don't think any of them are mutually exclusive. And the bigger purpose of what we're trying to do, I think, as we kind of keep defining it throughout this living process, is that we're, on the one hand, looking to identify the degradation challenges, and then on the other hand, showing how through a bioregional approach, we can start to improve these degraded conditions through social and ecological regeneration. And that the mapping that we do is just one tool to tell that story. So I can see a really good thread through these 3 categories that you've put on there. And it's until we start doing it, in my opinion, it's going to be impossible to define what it's going to look like or whatnot. So yeah, some kind of Excel sheet or database where we just start putting all the different mapping tools, all the different resources, all, like, have a tab for in the cognitive mapping, we want to talk about the mindset change that's needed to re-indigenize our way of thinking. And what is even re-indigenize? Yeah, I'll stop there. Otherwise, I'll just keep rambling on. But I think all of these can be done together and as part of that same narrative that is a tool to achieve the social and ecological regeneration through a bioregional lens. Over.
Thank you, Elliot. Peter?
So I'm loving what people are saying. This idea of a meta map, I think to me refers to the maps that we have in our head, the idea that you can create a map. And in thinking about time, an issue that's come up in the conversation earlier, there's a model of thinking about time, which is a map, not a flow. So I do think that mapping onto the physical world, which is what you usually think about when you think about a map, the ideas that are necessary to regenerate our thinking about that physical world is an important part of the process. So I commend you for actually asking the question, which is, why are we thinking about mapping? What do we want to accomplish? And for me, it's all the goals that you laid out. It's having a conversation about language. What does regeneration mean? What does re-indigenization mean, as Elliot used? I think that's a really important idea, which relates to having a sense of place, but a sense of place that occurs over time. So I'm not sure I'm offering anything concrete to the conversation other than to endorsing this idea of stepping back and saying, you know, we don't want just a map of farmers markets or nuclear power plants, which of course is an important part of mapping a bioregion, but it's more the cultural aspects that we have to map, if I can put it that way.
Mhm.
So I'm here in Seattle, the Olympic Peninsula area, and I was just in the public library, and the Suquamish Native Americans are here, have been here, and they are reasserting themselves, as is happening across the country. Good thing. And they have a weekly newspaper, and so I was reading for the past year, or monthly newspaper, I was reading it, and they had a column specifically on oral history, so interviewing process that they are getting out whoever they can to interview the elders. And then they're saying the questions they're asking are simple things. How did they live? What was their day like? How did they get their supplies? How did they make baskets? How did they make clothes? How did they take care of themselves? So it's a really inspiring thing to see. And I think that fits somewhere in here in this cognitive mapping. Also, I heard a presentation recently from Tasmania University that spoke about how this green energy is not the wonderful thing that we are maybe thinking it is, and that we're going to create a lot more harm in mining minerals, etc. But the final sentence the presenter said is that we need to look at our human consumption patterns, and do we really need all that we have? And to me, that means looking at the indigenous, how did they do it for thousands of years? And just offering that as an option for people who may have no clue and think that we need to have nonstop food, entertainment, clothes, etc. So I feel like that fits in here somewhere. I hope my thinking is correct. Over.
Yeah, I think it does. And I'm getting the sense that, so I'm going to create a new thing, because I guess for me, what's been missing is I want to start like being able to put up these ideas when we're talking about them so that we can visualize them. Because that's the one thing that I'm getting is when I'm rewatching the calls to take my notes and to put up the summary, I feel like I'm getting a lot from that. And that's why that's really my only purpose of wanting to bring up this Jamboard, is to be able to have this written down somewhere so that we can start visualizing it and start finding patterns in what we're bringing up. But what I'm thinking is I'm just putting, so I'm thinking let's just make it hell of a lot more simple. And maybe we can do is we can start putting it into two buckets. And that's the values, and then how do you present those values? So like the values are just all the things that we're talking about right now. What is regeneration, how we want to create a culture, how we want to investigate in re-indigenization, and then from there we get to it today. Great. If not, we can get to it another time, start talking about what that would actually look like in what we're mapping. Kim?
Okay, well, a couple things. The first is, it's been said, and I, shared some other places, that the like the highest leverage point, not a systems person, the highest leverage point for the shift needed is in how we view ourselves in the world, right? So all of these different reasons, like the things, that Doreen was just saying, plus we could talk here for weeks on these subjects because there are so many. So that map that you have somewhere, Anna, that just that is without the human, not a lot of the human boundaries on there, that was just the bioregion of the whole Great Lakes, and then it was colorized where, you could
Yeah,
see.
the watersheds.
Yeah, it's the water. It's starting with earth. So
Mhm.
the land and the water. In an indigenous places, there's no difference between land and water. It's all one. But we have a very distinctive place here, right? And just looking at that map, it's like, I do think that does create a little shift. So I've heard, and I've experienced that. So that was one thing. Because there's so many subjects, maybe we want to look at mapping related to the ideas in Joe's book, just because, that's something distinctive here. Yeah, and I'm going to put something, I've shared this email with a couple people because there's just a couple of different podcasts or talks, and I'm not going to change the context of it, but just related to the indigenous stuff that, Doreen was mentioning. I heard something very profound from an indigenous healer who is saying that, indigenous healing begins with relationship. It's all about relationship, which is everything here is all about relationship. So I don't know where that goes in this conversation, but I'm putting it into the chat.
Great, thank you. Elliot?
Yeah. So to try to make this more concrete, how I would imagine something like this working is going into a school or a gathering or some kind of place where people are, and saying, this is where you live. This is the whatever. This is the Brawny Creek watershed. It flows across the Niagara Escarpment like this. It was created by glaciers. The neutral people live here. They were also known as the Chilatan, the people who tend the deer. These are some of their cultural characteristics, which might be different from the ways that we now commonly think about hunting and animal husbandry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then getting into, how are we thinking now? So how are we thinking in terms of the road structure versus the water structure? These biophysical governing structures versus human governing structures. What are some examples of regenerative projects in the area? in what ways are they regenerative? Are they regenerating the soil? Are they regenerating our hearts and minds? Are they regenerating things that we can't really quantify, but by diving deeper into them, we can get a good sense of what they are? And how can you connect to this? What are some ways that we can apply these principles in our own lives, or, you know, in the concluding half an hour, hour and a half, whatever, of this hypothetical gathering that I'm proposing?
Mhm.
Also, just a note, take it or leave it, but that as I'm assuming we're all non-Indigenous to Turtle Island here, that we're very careful with using terms like the Indigenous in broad strokes. And yeah, that's my note.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. Benji?
Well, I wonder if anybody'd like to respond to what Elliot brought in before I go. Give him a little pause. Okay.
Doreen
So,
here.
Peter? Oh, two people.
Well, go ahead, Doreen. I'm happy to.
Okay, my comment is just that, yes, I totally agree with, we can't just say indigenous, because just like we can't say humans, there are African, Irish, Australian, there's so many so yes, we have to be very careful how we, and ask how to refer to persons. So I like the way you, Elliot, that you presented how to think about this. That makes it easier for me to understand.
Mhm.
Over.
So if I could just agree with Doreen and Elliot, but Doreen actually mentioned Irish, and actually I'm Celtic. So I've been spending a fair amount of time thinking about what do my Indigenous roots in Scotland mean in terms of this important process of re-indigeneity more generally. I do think that we have to be very cautious, as Elliot said, about somehow representing cultural traditions that we're not a part of. But on the other hand, I think we really all have to think deeply about how we all can connect better with the concept of being Indigenous, even if we can't represent ourselves as specific traditions. So I think it's an important balance, but we can't, to my mind, kind of respect those traditions and all the work they're doing without feeling ourselves alienated from our own roots. So to me, it's a balance of respecting other traditions, but also finding our own roots.
I like that, Peter. I think that's great that we can reconnect with our indigenous roots wherever they may be. I think that's a great, that seems like an invigorating thing. Like, I would want to be part of that. You know, I would want to find out, where are my roots? What did my great grandparents do? Where are they from? What do they think? That sounds to me like an invitation. Over.
I love where this conversation is going. I think that it's so important. It's so important to bring up the need to proceed with caution and sensitivity, because there have been so many atrocities, as we're all aware of. And also, I think that Peter's compulsion is spot on. I too have been looking up Celtic history recently, trying to reconnect to my own roots. Just found out that my last name, Ross, was changed to Ross from Andreas not too long ago, which I think is like a little bit cooler. I kind of wish it was still that. But anyways, I digress. I think that when we're talking about the noosphere, Peter, and we're cognitive mapping, one of the most potent ideas, metaphors, synapses that we can all form in our brains to unlock as much earth regeneration as possible is this compulsion to rediscover what it means to be indigenous. So, hey, RJ, there he is.
I already
Um,
figured we could all look at each other. instead of
Yeah, no, that's great.
typing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's healthy to want to come back to our landscapes and be part of them, right? To belong deeply. Like that is, what does that mean in the 21st century? It requires that we navigate a lot of history, and we consider a lot of different people, and we do it together, and we allow each other to do it. We figure out how we get that permission. I think honestly, one way is just to get out there and just go walk around the landscape and connect with trees and just slowly rediscover what it's like to come out of our damn heads. That's a big part of it, right? And so with all of that in mind, I will say I read the book Sand Talk and it changed my life. RJ knows. We've had lots of conversations on this particular topic. I don't know how many people have read Sand Talk, but it's like, I recommend it like just as much as I recommend the Design Pathway. It is so good. Tyson Yunkaporta is such an entertaining writer and person in general. And currently reading it. Nice. Cool. Oh, how timely. He talks about the yarn, an indigenous social technology from Aboriginal Australia. He talks about how it's used very specifically in the Appalachian clan, which is where his particular roots come from. But I think that there's some generalizations that can be made about how the yarn is used across Australia. And really it's mapping. What it looks like is it's a social technology. It's a social container where people, where a tribe or a clan will get together and they go over their oral traditions. They review their metaphors and they compare them to how they're experiencing reality, such that if reality is changing, if their local environment, local ecology, local climate is changing, then they are looking at their metaphors and their oral traditions together and analyzing them, reflecting on them to see whether or not they need to be updated. And this is really a form of mapping. It's a mapping where you're going from abstraction, the oral tradition, metaphor, back into reality, and then back into the metaphor and updating it. It's a form of mapping. Broadly speaking, I mean, all mapping is just using tools to abstract reality so we can see it differently, so we can reveal things that were blind to us before. And so also, this is the last thing I'll say, the yarn, and I've alluded to this, but it can be an adaptive process. I think at its best, mapping is a highly adaptive process. It helps us to adapt to our places. And I think that that's one of the most useful ways of looking at it. How can we use mapping to adapt together, see things the same or together in relation to our places and in a nested embeddedness, because we also have to think at the planetary scale. Over.
Elliot, you want to go?
Fair. I'm on my phone here, so I can't see everybody's face at the same time. Yeah, like what you're just saying there, Benji. It's where we are and where we're going and how to get there. That's one way to define a map. So I'll just give an example from my own life of what I could be mapping in the next few years or so through my own work. So this is in the Southern Ontario context. Great Lakes, most of the fresh water in the world. Also a massive human created housing challenge. Also a massive human created soil challenge. But also massive opportunity to provide homes and food for people as the world gets more unstable. So this kind of comes back to what several people have been talking about in terms of getting to know their roots and how people once lived, whether it was their ancestors or people in the places where they now live or visit. So one of the parts of my work is getting these monoculture conifer plantations thinned out so that they can turn into native forests with a good mix of diversity. We're looking at taking some of these thinned wood products and turning them into cross-laminated timber, which can replace steel and concrete from construction. The government here just recently announced that now instead of one additional home, you can build 3 additional homes on agricultural land. So kind of tie some of these threads of these conifer plantations as a 90-year soil restoration technique, the way that we think about where the materials that we live in and work with come from, how to create more local scapes for all of that, and the types of thinking that's needed to get there, and the types of resources. One of the challenges that I'm running into is that there are not enough people with the skills and equipment to harvest these stands. Part of that is because of the economic system that we live in. But anyways, like that is just one example of, if I was doing this by myself and not a part of the group, it's like, let's make a pilot project along this theme, because we've just got to start somewhere, and then we can adapt and change and add in other layers as it goes. And this is just my own personal opinion, maybe some whatever excitement or enthusiasm, but like, this is awesome to talk about. And we can probably talk about it for generations, especially when we're getting into, anyways. So, but if we're trying to create a design lab within the design school, yeah, I've said enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I thank you, Elliot. And yeah, I think that that's where I'm hoping to just gain some clarity too, because I agree. I think that there's just so many directions that we could take this, and I guess that's what that's what my goal here is, to kind of clarify, like what's a thread that we could maybe tug on a little bit and see if we followed that, where could it take us, and at least start investigating in those areas. So like I love the idea of getting an Excel spreadsheet where maybe like just collecting some of that information too throughout the week, if we want to add different mapping resources, different what were the other things that you had mentioned, Elliot, different that we put in the spreadsheet.
What are the degradation like, maybe let's just start in our, and just a suggestion, start in our own individual watersheds. So how does my watershed work? Like real high level stuff. It starts here, it ends there. It runs through these and these physical features, wetlands, whatever. What are the degradation challenges? And those could be in our cognition. They could be physical ones, whatever, quarries, extraction. And then what are some of the tools out there? So we've got the big map to save the future. We've got, I just found a community mapping tool for like child support resources, I'm forgetting the exact words, but just kind of putting all of that into a database. And then what do we need to collect more information on, and maybe, think of some type of thread to tell the story of where we want to go to with, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question. Or
Nope, yeah, that's exactly it. I'm jotting down notes. Benji?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Elliot actually expressed pretty clearly some potential next steps there. I was just kind of thinking about some of the challenges of if we want to do something, if the Great Lakes wants to do something that actually has impact on the ground, right? If we don't want to just get caught in abstraction, I'm just trying to think, what would that be, especially given the fact that although you were all in the same general region, nobody is right next to each other. So I think if you were going to do anything on the ground, given the current orientation, it would have to be as individuals, unless you were going to drive a couple hours and visit somebody and contribute to something on the ground. So I just wanted to point out that challenge, that complexity, and as we and you all are thinking about concrete next steps, what does that look like if you're making sure that it has impact, given the current challenge, given the map of the people here? And maybe I'll just say that for now, because I've been talking a lot. Love to hear from RJ. And then Elliot, I don't know, Elliot, maybe you want to respond to that directly. RJ, do you mind if he wants to respond to that directly, just for continuity?
Yeah, real quick, like, I'm happy to contribute to somebody else's project. I don't need to be nearby to map out their watershed for them, or like search up the tools that are available readily. Like, there's some stuff where obviously need to be on the ground, but in order to get a pilot process of how we would make a bioregional map or mapping process that leverages us into the future that we want to go, we don't all have to be in the same place. We've got the internet for now.
So may I just comment on that and think we're onto something here? So I've been chatting about plastics and pharmaceuticals. I mean, there's Prozac in Lake Erie that's affecting the marine environment. So to a certain extent, mapping these kind of toxic chemicals, phosphorus, the farmers, I mean, this is a common issue in the Great Lakes. So maybe that's a way to think about this, how the water is being degraded. And I think it's important for us to keep a positive element, which is what are the concepts that are floating around or in Lake Erie around regeneration and re-indigenization and so on, that allow us to think positively about the fact that our lakes are unhealthy, and how can we as humans bring ideas to the lake that make them healthier. I do have to go, as I mentioned in the chat. So, and I will be looking forward to listening to our next speaker, and then I will have to go on. But thank you. I think Anna, thank you. I think we made a lot of progress in the sense of an important discussion about what are the importance of working together to map our lakes and what that means. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Have a good night. RJ, would you
Bye,
like?
Peter.
Yeah, just jumping in here. I'm loving this conversation. I'll say what I'm thinking is I think in terms of the mapping and there on the landscape and the watershed, what I really see it as is not abstraction at all, to be telling the stories that we need to tell. And the stories go to various people, various groups, and they connect us in a deep way. So if we're talking with students of certain ages, that's possibly the easiest, best group to be talking to, because their minds are not filled with certain concrete things that have been drummed into them, and they really do appreciate the story, and they get it very quickly on that abstract level that leads to many deeper things, maybe even for the rest of their lives. We also can use the stories in so many ways with people who don't think of a landscape as a landscape other than, streets and corners and stoplights and houses and this kind of stuff. When they realize that there's water running all the way through it, there's a river running through it, when they realize that there's much beyond what they consider to be the present that's already been, paved over or taken over or used in various ways, then they begin to realize, if they don't oppose it, they begin to realize that there's a way of doing what they want to do, but doing it in partnership with the world that they're in. So I see it all as stories. I think that's really a higher level function of human beings. I mean, who tells stories except humans? And we were talking about indigenous. In our own ways, we're all indigenous to different places. However, so many of us have lost those connections, and the stories had not been told for generation after generation. And now we've got kind of this strange story is, oh, we did it all and the earth didn't even exist. And we just invented all these things and look at this wonderful, world that we've created. And it's missing so much of the picture that we're causing our own demise in so many ways. So that's the way I see all of this. And I see it as very, like if I were there with Elliot, I'm sure I could immediately learn 10 things I didn't know that he knows about right where he's standing. So if we do it in that way and think of it that way, we're all enriched by it. And we're helping to create something that has been, it's in many ways lost, for our use to live in the world. So I just think I really like where this is going. If I'm understanding it correctly, I think I do. And there certainly is a place for what we call scientific knowledge that tells a story too, but not to remove ourselves from it, to see it and feel it in the context that it belongs. So just that. And thanks. I'm glad to be here for a few minutes.
Thanks for joining, RJ. And love your input here. So I definitely see in terms of the patterns that are coming up, certainly this need for a story to be developed around what we are mapping. And I think also ensuring that we're including the people as well. And I think what Elliot was saying in terms of us being able to combine almost all three of those ideas down the road with this project, I think would be really, really awesome. And forming kind of like a storytelling packet of our bioregions. That would be, I'm just thinking of the community groups that I work with and how beneficial that would be for when we do outreach and go into schools and work with kids or do after school activities and working with kids, and how beneficial that would be to some of the outreach that I'm just doing. I think that it would be incredible. But I think that the next steps could definitely be that we start kind of just filling up an Excel spreadsheet with some of this information, maybe including maps that we really like that already exist, or the projects in our area, the mapping technologies, like Elliot was saying, facts about our watersheds, where it is, what the problems are, the physical conditions. Does that sound like a plan for people? If I put up an Excel spreadsheet and maybe made like a Cleveland one, a Rochester one, a Buffalo one, a Toronto one, and then like a general mappings tool that we could all work on this in between now and the next time we meet for a mapping discussion?
I think it's a good start.
Yeah, and I'm also happy to contribute to like if we decide that, Anna, like you've got a need for a mapping process and tool like this, and it could maybe help foster some type of bioregional activation in your area. It's like can also make the little watershed maps that are specific to your area and help out in that way, so that we're kind of combining forces.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, when I first heard about this design lab, like I have some connections in my area, and definitely groups that are very interested in watersheds. And this, I just see this as an opportunity to almost like an outreach or a marketing technique where we could say, like, look, this is what our group is doing. This is what Earth Regenerators and the design school is doing. And don't you want to get involved with our group? And I think that this could really potentially bring a lot of value to any organizations that we want to collaborate with. So I might just reach out to you about that, Elliot, because we do need an updated watersheds map. Sure. Jonathan and Victoria, I know that Victoria, you aren't really able to talk, but I'm just wondering if you guys had anything that you wanted to add.
Well, it would just be very helpful to have, you know, a map of the Genesee River watershed that we could, I don't know how we could use it as a foundation for putting things onto it. If there's a way to capture it and then place little icons on it that can be clickable and can say, provide more information about projects, if that's possible. If there's tools to do that, I'd love to learn more about them.
So Jonathan, are you asking for something?
Well, yes, a map of our watershed.
So you're asking someone to show us where we could find a map that we can use for our watershed. Okay.
Yeah,
Is that a request that for Elliot or?
I can
Well-
send me an email to remind
Okay.
me. I'm about to head into the bush for a week or so. So it might be in a little while, but yeah, I can do it.
and I don't know if I have your email, so if you want to just pop it in the chat.
I have it. I can send it to you. We'll both email you, Elliot. I'll send an email with both
Okay.
on it.
Great.
Yeah, that's great. When I know that we're looking to set up a meeting with the Genesee Land Trust. And, you know, that would be great to have our own map. You know, of what we're doing, you know, so that we can at least be familiar with our own before we see theirs, because I'm sure they have great maps. So that would be cool. But Elliot, hey, whenever, you know, everything we're doing is going to take time. And no, I've been listening, and I don't have anything to add right now. No. But I love the idea of mapping. It's just such a great way of getting people engaged. Absolutely. Thanks.
I agree. I don't think I ever really thought about maps in any fraction as much as I have since this conversation's been started, and just how many ways we can use them. Benji?
Well, speaking of ways that we can use them, Peter dropped in the chat. He suggested that Lake Effect Magazine be considered a venue for these maps, which I thought was really an interesting way of putting it. And, you know, as we're mapping, I think that as often as possible, you know, there is the idea of searching for these, you know, larger narratives to weave our maps together, but I don't think that should slow us down or stop us from just making a regular practice of sharing maps with each other and just talking about them and just like sharing what we know, what we're learning based on each map. And I think the more that we do that on a regular basis, we'll just increase our like bioregional fluency, if you want to call it that, our familiarity with place. Like, I think that, you know, do that all the time. And if you all would like, I could, if there's an interest, I can create a bit of a venue in a design school or elsewhere. I can facilitate or host, and I'm sure Anna would be willing to as well. Although I don't want to speak for you. Basically, we can create opportunities for this sharing to happen. So if there is the impulse, let us know. I'd love to facilitate that because we need a lot more of that. I'm pretty sure.
Yes, and I'd be happy to host. Kim?
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention, in the chat, I put in some notes that I took from just listening last night to kind of like the living system design architects, like language that just resonated. But what I want to also share is maybe, this could be something, well, one, Bioregional Learning Center, all of this whole conversation is just a reminder of how so much could go into a, learning center. You could have the dialoguing, you could have stories, you could have science, all of these things, which aren't necessarily going to go onto a map that we're working on right now. And then just, at Case Western Reserve University, for anyone that's heard of appreciative inquiry, that process, that was started at Case by, friends of Peter's. And just, that is something where you look, like you hold a vision. Well, there's perspective theorizing where you actually hold a vision of what the greater state of existence is, and somehow you're all moving together toward it. But appreciative inquiry is a process where similar, there is that, what is the best possible thing that can come out of us working and being a bioregion? And then you look at what systems need to transform, or what needs to transform to get from current state there. So it's just a little different way of looking at this in the mind and thought, and what we are keeping in our conscious awareness. So, and then I'm sorry, that's where my head tends to go. So it's like hard to get granular. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Kim, too. A reminder to think of like future states, our ideal future state, and breaking it down by that, like how do we get there? Yeah, like you said. So thank you for.
Yeah, and then that's the starting point,
Yeah.
so it's just a little different.
Well, and I guess for your ideal future state, what would that be? No.
That is a question for the group, and I would say beyond the people here, beyond people, that is going to, water is a lie. I mean, it depends on how you see the world, but all of these different spheres are a reality. So going back to ask the river. We're in relationship. I mean, we, talk about indigenous teachers, wherever indigenous people, it was a time when we were far more connected to all that's around us than what we've created as human beings. The problems that we're all trying to solve are by human beings, not generally created by these other spheres, not by our ancestors, not by those to come, not by the trees or the other plants or cosmos. It's humans, and we invite more in, and that's the way a lot of people live. Invite more in inquiry, and then more, you get help from beyond us. That's my little done. I'm done.
Well, thanks, Kim. No, I appreciate your perspective a lot, and kind of I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind too, as we move forward. And I'm just also really excited because I feel like whenever I email you or talk to you, I get like a list of resources that I'm like, ooh, these all look so interesting. So I also am kind of excited to see with this Excel spreadsheet what everybody brings to it. And I think that it'll also be interesting to see like what is it that calls to us that we're adding to it. And I will try to, I know that we had brought up just how would it be formatted to make sure that it's somewhat coherent. So I'll at least, have some categories that we can add to it, that I think would be helpful to fill out. But as always, everybody here is welcome to also add things themselves and help the process along.
I have just one more thing, one practical thing.
Yeah.
Last week I dropped in the names of different people locally here meeting who are doing regenerative work, all kinds of different farms, these things that like I don't even know exist. I know they must be around here, and they're here, and there's so many, right? And this particular group that's going around and it's going to create forests, the little mini forests in 5 different places in our bioregion. They decided to do that after being inspired by the same group that I learned later has funded John and the big map. What is it?
The big map to
Climate.
save the future.
Yes, but there was I just happened to read something that there's a group that funded that, and that same group is the one that inspired these people locally to go out and get together to start having climate conversations, like in the region with people, on the ground. And personally, just with my likes, that's what I like to help amplify, people who are already doing that, as well as water and land and, what's beyond us.
Yeah. Well, and I think John had mentioned that he was going to be kind of in and out today, so I'm not sure if he's available, but definitely something that we could bring up at he's going to be presenting next week, so something that you can bring up at the webinar when he and Charlie present on their map. RJ?
Yes, just a real quick thing. Yeah, categories of maps, so that we're able to find what we want to find, I think is really good. And also, I would suggest that down the line, we want to be able to layer some of the features of our maps so we can go in and out of the various details that are there, not to confuse it, but to bring the picture together however we need to for whatever uses. And I think that's possible. I know, for example, not knowing a lot about ArcGIS, that's something that it tries to do, is allow you to use it in various ways. You can take things away, put things in, and see the bigger picture of what actually is going on, and use it in different ways as well. So just that, besides the categories, I think we may be working toward a sort of layering, how we can actually have dynamic mapping in and out for wherever we're looking at, or how we relate to other physical pieces around us. So, water and landscape. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I agree. Thanks, RJ. Those are some great ideas. Well, and I think we are coming to the end of our time, so I would love to do just one more round with like a quick final word. And then we'll see you guys next week for John and Charlie's presentation. For me, I feel like I have stuff to prepare for, and I'm eager to get kind of things started and to see how it progresses. And I'll pass it along to Victoria.
Hey, well, I'm looking forward to next week, and this was a great conversation. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, absolutely. Not much more to add to it. It's really covering the waterfront, so it's great. Thank you.
I have to go. This
Angie?
is Doreen. Sorry, I'm jumping in. I feel grateful. Thank you.
Great,
Bye.
thanks, Doreen.
Wonderful. Benji?
Yeah, I'm really encouraged by the conversation that's unfolding here, and all of the deep insights, and also really excited to attend the webinar next week, and also to hear from Brandon Letzinger in Cascadia, just to see a comparison of how this is happening elsewhere. I think it's going to be really informative. orienting. So over to RJ.
Yeah, intriguing, energizing, and very relevant to what we're trying to do about bioregional regeneration. I think it really fits the design school. I think this is a key piece of it too. So thanks.
You want to pass it along? I think, I'm not sure if John Schull is still present, so maybe Kim can close out.
Kim, sure. Thanks.
Just grateful, and I really like get a good sense of Elliot's presentation and the calmness of all the things he talks about in the map. I would be I would feel good in his map. If that makes any sense.
Yes, I think he knows what he's doing, so very encouraging. All right, well, thank you, everyone. I'll see you all probably before next week, but otherwise I'll see you next week.
Anna, you're Herculean.
Thanks.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.